Good morning. Today we are here to read a poem named Futility, written by Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Owen, one of the well-known poets of the First World War, has become a symbol of many, encapsulating a sense of futility, anger, and despair at the suffering endured by the soldiers. Owen was to take both realism and his own romantic notions and create a poetic synthesis that was both sympathetic, as summarized by his famous phrase, "the pity of war." In this way, Owen's poetry is quite distinctive, and he is by many considered a greater poet than others. Owen was wounded in combat in 1917 and diagnosed with a shell shock, was evacuated to War Hospital near Edinburgh. There he met another patient, the poet Sassoon, who served as a mentor and introduced him a well-known literary figure such as Robert Graves and H.G. Wells. It was at this time Owen wrote many of his most important poems, including Anthem of Doomed Youth and Dull or Decorum. His poetry often graphically illustrated the horrors of warfare, the physical landscapes that surrounded him, and human body in relation to those landscapes. His work stands in stark contrast to the patriotic poem of war written by early poets of Great Britain, such as Rupert Brooke, a man. Owen also often celebrated male beauty and camaraderie in his poem. Here the given poem, Futility, takes the form of short elegy. An elegic poem was a form of writing that had in its first depiction in the 16th century but had not become gratuitously used before. Only a handful of famous elegiac poems come to mind, chief of which is Thomas Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard. An elegy was considered to be a lament, a crying out for the loss of beloved, and was used primarily in the romantic sense. Once more, Owen subverts the truth by applying it to soldier, and while scholars who point out Owen's sense of latent in his poems are not wrong, one should also consider the closeness that Owen felt towards his fellow brother in arms. He wrote, "I came out in order to help these boys directly by leading them as well as an officer can. Good or bad, the immense strain put on Owen by pushing him to lead the charge contributed to his poetry as well as to the growing sense of misanthropy that he suffered as soon as he returned to war. He even wrote a Sasur blaming him for went back. That is my consolation for feeling a fool. This is what the shells scream at me every time. Haven't you got the wits to keep out to this? Sassoon of Sassoon of course has no such things. Owen was merely overworked and close to his breaking point. Futility follows the aftermath of battlefield. A soldier had died and companions reminiscence on death throughout the poem. And the final effect is of a poem that is close to biblical, tortured and beautiful, but ultimately a lament on the waste of innocent lives. Now I will read the poem. Move him into the sun. Gently its touch awake him once. At home whispering of fields half sown, always it woke him, even in France, until this morning and this snow. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of cold star. Our limbs so dear achieved, our sides full nerve, still warm, too hard to steal. Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made few tears, sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all. This is the poem where our poet Wilfred Owen, a British soldier during the period of the World War I, it was fought between 1914 to 1918. In the World War I, more than 90% of the nations were divided into two parts and fought the World War I. Here we will see the appreciation summary of the poem. It is like this. Futility is a poem written by Wilfred Owen, a British soldier during World War I. Written this poem in 1918. The poem elegies the unnamed soldier lying dead in the snow or in France. This image resonates with the poem's speaker, causing him to her to resist life's value, giving death inevitability. Unlike Owen's other poems, which contain violent bodily imagery, this poem features a calmer, more resigned tone, underlining the speaker's act of mourning the futility of life in the face of death. Move the dead soldier into the sunlight. It was warm touch used to wake him in the morning, reminding him of fields he had to finish filling his seeds. It always woke him up, even on the battlefields of France, until his snowy morning. If anything can wake him now, the kind old sun will know about it. Think how the sun lets seeds grow as if waking him up, and how it allowed human life to spring from the earth, which was once a barren cold planet, are dead bodies still precious, full of nerves, and want too hard to move anymore? Did life emerge from the earth just as it could die? Why should useless sunlight have bothered to wake the earth at all? Owen's futility here alleges an unnamed soldier lying dead in the snow in France, in the battlefield of the France. The speaker begins with a hopeful tone, wanting the sun to rouse the dead body, but shifts to one of confusion and disillusionment upon recognizing that death will always conquer life. Through this shift in tone, the poem uses the dead soldier as a catalyst for large, deeper mourning, that of the futility of the act of creation in the face of the death's inevitability. The poem's confidence descriptions of the sun's power to nourish life in the first stanza contrast with the way it doubts life purpose in the second stanza. The speaker first response to seeing the dead soldier is to move him into sun, because the sun always woke him throughout his life. Even though the soldier is dead, the speaker seems confident that the kind of the old sun will know a way to revive him. Yet, while the sun may be powerful enough to wake the seeds and warm even the surface of the distant star, it cannot keep the soldier fallen dead. The speaker is at how something precious and beautiful as life can always lose out to the death, and puts forth a rhetorical question as way of underlining his or her shock. Our limbs so dear achieved, our sights full nerve, still warm, too far, too still. These are the lines in the poem. Too hard to steal the dead body, albeit surrounded by warm sunlight, will never come back to life. The speaker then asked, was it for this and clay grew tall? Human beings originally came from an idea common in creation. Myths throughout the world, including the Bible, expressing that life would bother existing given that it would always lose to death. Here, in this way, the poet is speaking about the futility of life. The speaker here woefully wonders in the poem final two lines why the pointless sunbeams would help create life on earth in the first place. When that life would eventually die, the speaker's perspective thus widens beyond the dead soldier to include all of life rather than only being an elegy to a specific person whom the poem does not even bother to name. The poem is always dedicated to mourning death's power over life, an idea magnified by the context of the war. Although it contains things of hope, the poem's tone ultimately comes across more mournful, doubtful, and discouraging. When situated in historical context, these tone qualities make sense. Wilfred Owen was a British soldier during World War I and was therefore surrounded by death. Regardless of the however many sunny days occurred during the war, death likely dominated his mind and perspective that manifested in the poem Futility. This is the poem where we may consider it as a elegy because the reference of the dead soldier is there. Then the mindset of the poet, and at last eulogy level for humanity. With this, the poet expressed his own views of life in the period of the World War I, which was fought between 1914 to 1918. In this way, the poet Wilfred Owen has discussed the poem. With this, I conclude. Thank you. Good day.